Okay, tonight we continue our study here in the book of James, which is Practical Christianity, or the book of common sense. We spent a lot of time talking about the introduction to it. Start out tonight with the death of James, the way that it has been reported, the historical evidence that he was taken up on that temple, that particular corner, and pushed off, and then they beat him with clubs and they killed him because he was a very righteous man. And so we now then get into the book of James, and last week then we started in there talking about this is a book that's going to deal with everyday Christianity. He's going to be preaching to the Jews who are out in the dispersion, telling them how to live for Christ every day. He starts out by talking about joys and trials. One of the things that those people were subjected to would be a great number of persecutions, a great number of trials out in these foreign lands. And so he now is trying to lay the groundwork, practically speaking. Here's how you need to look at your troubles. Here's how you need to look at your trials. Instead of looking at them as horrible, horrible things, which they are, and becoming bitter and ugly, look at them exactly the opposite way. So he's going to start out now telling them to be joyful in these trials. Last week we started out and we spent quite a lot of time on this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time tonight. But we need to look really at the nature of trials, and they must be understood in order to see how you can have joy while you are enduring them. Now, James is not saying that one should pursue these and try to get troubles and trials because they're fun, you see. But it's not that at all. There's a vast difference between joy and fun. You might see somebody having fun, and you might say they are a joyful crew. But if you're having fun, in fact, the very word fun comes from a word that means outside. It's something outside that brings you happiness. In other words, we all go snowmobiling tomorrow. Well, we're up there and just having a good time. We're having fun doing this there. But there's a difference in that and joy. Joy has the idea of an inward contentment. It's being contented on the inside. It's like Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are they who. In other words, he says that if you want to have inner contentment so that you have peace of soul, then here is how you live. So, this is what James is going to tell us about this. We illustrated it last week by talking about when you have some bad thing happening. A good way to look at it, and we use root canal. After we got through with that, Pam came out and said, thanks, I'm having a root canal in the morning. So she had a root canal 1 week ago from tomorrow morning. And so what do you do when you're sitting in a dentist chair and you're having a root canal? Now, hers turned out, she said, was not painful at all, and I think it was a pleasure she had, just taking relaxation there. But if I hear that a lot of root canals are very painful. Now, as you go into this, and you're there in the dentist office, man, I hate every minute of it. See, I hate every minute of it. This is going to be painful, and I can't wait. Well, there's a point to look at. And that is that you don't laugh and think, hey, this is fun. But if you will lean back and say, ouch, this really hurts. See, I hate it. It really hurts, but look at the end result. See? Look at what it will bring to you. Look at the health that you will have and the lack of pain that you will have. And so it depends on how you look at that root canal while you're sitting in the chair. Now, root canals last for an hour. These troubles that these people had last for weeks, weeks, months, years. And so as you're going through your problems, always look and say, there will be a good outcome that comes from this. That's what he's going to be dealing with. And then we pointed out that when you go through any kind of a real problem, you are going to come out a changed individual. You will be changed. You'll either be better or you'll be worse, but you're not going to be the same. And whether you're better or whether you're worse depends entirely upon you as you go through it, how you look at it, how you handle your troubles. That really is what James is going to be dealing with. So now then, we went through this chart. He started out and he says count. That means deem it or reckon it. Count it all joy. That is, just be joyful about this particular thing when you're doing this. Now, I've got down there, and I don't want to skip over here again. I want to bring it out. Hebrews 12:2, which gives you an idea of what this joy is. And I think it's the best illustration you could possibly get. In Hebrews 12:2, here it's talking about Jesus. And when he was on the cross, it says he was despising the shame. Now picture Jesus on that cross, and picture him despising the shame. And just think about that. That's all to think about right now. Now, what was happening to him? Well, he's up there. He has been beaten. Isaiah said so that it's hard to tell that he was really even a human being. He was suffering all of those bodily torments that he was suffering. And then down at the foot of the cross was his mother and friends, and they were looking up and watching him suffer. And then there were the enemies, and they were coming by and they were yelling at him and humiliating him. And he's saying, hey, you said that you could do this. Come on down from the cross if you're the Christ. And they were making fun of him. And he despised that. He was in terrible torture. And yet it says, but for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. So at the same time that Jesus was on that cross, with all of that horrible, horrible humiliation, physical pain, shame, and embarrassment, there it says he was able to endure it because of the joy. He had joy. He had an inward contentment that was set before him. Jesus had come to this earth to die on the cross for mankind. He was now in the last throes of doing this. He was suffering in this terrible way, and as he dies on that cross and sheds his blood, he then becomes the Savior of mankind. And so then he could look and he could say, it's almost over, and I endure this horrible shame, then I will have paid the price, I will be the Savior of mankind, and people will be able to live with me forever. So Jesus is the epitome of this joy that you have in there. So then he says, my brethren, he uses this 15 times in the book, which shows his close relationship with them. We're all the same parent. Then he says, when you fall into, and so I want to emphasize this, it's not talking about any trials. It's not talking about trials that you bring upon yourself, but trials that you fall into. That things happen to you that you have not really done from your own sin and stupidity. Then he uses the word manifold trials. The word manifold means of different colors or variegated of different sorts. It refers to all kinds of colors and degrees. For instance, if somebody came in here tomorrow and they took yellow, green, purple, and all kind of paint, and they splashed it on the wall over there, and you come in, and somebody says, what color is that wall? You could say, well, it is manifold color. It is all different kinds of color. It's used to describe God's wisdom. How wise is God? It talks about the manifold wisdom of God. How great his wisdom is in every realm. Man may be wise in one way. Another man may be wise in 2 ways. Another one may be wise in 47 ways. But God's wisdom extends in every direction under every circumstance. So we say, in every kind of trial, tribulation that comes to you. Now, we come to this word then. These trials or temptations. Now, I put both of them down here because this same Greek word can be translated either temptations or trials. And in some places in your Bible, it will be translated temptations. In others, it'll be translated trials. Now, both translations are true because this one word is used for both of these things that are here. Now, as we start looking at it, just briefly, this word is used to describe both inward temptations to do wrong and outward testing to determine how strong you really are. For instance, if Oliver is tempting me to sin, and he's enticing me with money, and he's enticing me in certain ways, he's tempting me to sin. Now, on the other hand, Oliver may decide he wants to put me to the test. And so he says, Lowell, here's what I want you to do. And he's putting me to the test to see if I can pass the test, if I'm strong enough to do it. That's there. And so both of them will be used, but we're going to talk about this more in just a little while. Now here it's referring to outward problems and troubles. So let's keep that in mind. Just a few verses later on, we'll change it, and you'll see how the change comes. Now, the reason for joy now is what he's saying. Because when you go through these troubles and trials, then it is the proving, right in here, is a thing that it tells you that it does, knowing that the proving of your faith. The word proving refers to a crucible or a furnace for smelting. It refers to the element that comes out of this thing. Oliver has these things out here. Now, you don't have to look at a furnace as some great big giant thing like they might have down in manufacturing in here, but Oliver will have some crucibles out there and that he heats up, and he's going to heat it up. And so what he does is he'll take his metals that he's got. He may buy all kind of rings. I sell him some old rings that I've got, and you sell him some old rings that you've got. And Oliver will take these, and what Oliver's after is gold. And so he puts them in there, and then he heats them all up. And really hot. It gets so hot that it will melt everything out of there except gold. And the only thing that's left is that gold. So when he melts it all out, and there's only a little bit of stuff that's left in there, lets it cool down, then he reaches in and he pulls out what's in there. Now, he may have put in a pound of gold rings. But when he pulls it out, Oliver, what would you expect if you had a pound of gold rings and you pull out just the gold?
It's about 7 ounces.
About 7 ounces. Okay, so he pulls out now only 7 ounces. Now, what's the difference between this 7 ounces and the pound? See, he had a pound over here, but this pound of stuff he put in had a lot of debris in it, didn't it? It had a lot of other metals and so forth. But when he pulls this out, this is the pure stuff. So Oliver could say, this metal is tested. See, I could say, Oliver, what will you take for this? And he tells me, it's tested, Lowell. I guarantee you that is pure gold. It's been proven. Oliver's proven it by putting it through the fire. That's what this word is. Now, you will be tested, and your proof will come out on the other side. You're going to be put through the testing of trials and tribulations. That's when the real test comes. Anybody can be a Christian in good times and happy days. But as you go through trials and tribulation, as it really costs you, it may cost you your job, it may cost you your money, it may cost you your house, it may cost you your friends or your family. But you go through this, and you stay firm and you stay faithful to God, then when you get through it, you are that chunk of pure gold. You're that chunk of gold, and that's what this word means. Your faith has been tested. What kind of faith do you have? Tested faith. pure, pure faith. As you look at it, when a person becomes a Christian, we've all seen this and we've seen it in our life. How enthusiastic is a person when they first become a Christian, when they first learn about Christ, and they first become a Christian, and I mean they're really, really excited. How do they act? How do they feel? Wow, oh boy, oh good, and they're just really excited, aren't they? And probably the first thing they do is to run to their friends and their neighbors and say, let me tell you something. Let me tell you this. Let me tell you that. And so they'll start telling their friends and telling that. And you look at them and you say, boy, what faith they have. Well, they do. They do have faith, but it's not tested yet. It's not until they go through the problems, troubles, tribulations of life to see, will that carry them through? Will their faith, do they have faith in Christ so they'll never waver? And the only way that can be done is through this. Now, we got down here, remember, this is not talking about suffering we do because of our sins and stupid decisions. You can look at 1 Peter 2:20. There Peter says, talking about Jesus and suffering because you do good. And he said, so, but if a person suffers for wrongdoing, if a person goes out and they rob a bank, and they kill somebody, they suffer because of their wrongdoings, they get caught, and then they get thrown in jail, and they suffer. And so the person says, well, okay, I earned it, I will endure it, and so they go through it. He said, what glory is there in that? What glory is there in suffering for something that you need to suffer for? Right? But it's when you suffer for those things that are not your fault, that you don't need to suffer for. As you look over in 1 Peter 4:15, there he says, let no man suffer as an evildoer or a meddler in other men's matters. Don't get yourself in a situation where you have to suffer for those evil things you're doing. But if any man suffer as a Christian, if you're suffering for Christ because you are a Christian, because you will not compromise your principles, if you're suffering on that basis, then let him glorify God in this name. So, need to keep in mind the kind of suffering we're talking about. Now, the proving your faith. Faith is it. I've got in here, faith is always made of two things. It's accepting what God says, Romans 10:17, and it's putting your trust in what he says. So now, do you really do it? Do you really do it? Okay, how are we going to know? How are we going to know? Oh, I believe God. Whatever God says, I believe him. Good. How are you going to know? See? How are you going to know? Oh, I trust him. I'll trust God. I'll trust God with my life. Even if it costs me to lose a lot of good things on this earth, I'll still trust him. How are you going to know whether you have that faith or not? See, it's when you go through that crucible of fire. So James is saying, just remember, as you go through it, you're going to go into it. Every one of us is going to go into life as having gold, but mixed with that gold are a whole lot of other metals. And do we have a whole lot of more metals? Dirt, clay, rock, or do we have real gold that's in there? It's when you go through, then you find out. And here it is. Then when you do this, then that develops patience. So it says, and your faith worketh patience. Now there's a big word. A big word. The word patience comes from two Greek words. The first one is hypo. That means under. That's what this right here is hypo me. It's under me. It's holding me up. And the next word is meno. And that means I remain. Now, patience is, I remain. I don't move. I remain steadfast under all of these pressures and tribulations that come upon me. I will not be moved. I will remain there. That's the word patience. That's what patience really means. Now, as you get down here, there's another word in the Bible called long-suffering. And we have a hard time trying to distinguish them. What's the difference? Well, here's the difference. Patience means enduring, remaining, bearing up under any outside trial. Whatever the trials are, you bear up under those trials. Long-suffering carries with it the idea of putting up with unbearable people. Putting up with people that cause you problems, with weak people, with people, sinful people that you just feel like that slapping and saying, "Oh, grow up," or "Get out of my life," or everybody has to put up with some people. We have those kind of people. That's what long-suffering is. Mature people have to be long-suffering with immature people. Right? And so that's the difference. Well, this is patience because it's the trials that are outside of us. Now, the reason for this patience, and so forth, that we have here is this. It says, "And let patience have its perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, lacking in nothing." So now then, as you become patient, as you remain faithful, unmovable, under tribulations, you let it have its perfect work. Carry it down to perfection. Now, what we mean by perfection, the perfect work, is that word comes from the word that literally means accomplish its purpose or achieve its end. It refers to an animal that's reached its full growth. You can look at a calf or you can look at a full-grown cow. This cow over here is perfect. That calf is not perfect. The calf is not grown up. That cow has grown up. It's a perfect cow. It refers to a surgeon who has finished all his training. That's how they would do it. So you go to a doctor or a surgeon. Well, is he still in training? Nope. This is a perfect surgeon. What do you mean? It means he's finished whatever it takes to become a surgeon. And it refers to a Christian in here who is mature. Now, it has nothing to do with sinlessness. Let's keep that in mind. When you're talking about being perfect in the Bible, that word has nothing to do with sinlessness unless it's talking about specifically about sin. If I am a perfect man, I come before you tonight and tell you I am a perfect man. What does that mean? I have all my parts. I'm not missing a leg. I'm not missing something. I still have all my parts. That really is all it means. What does it mean about perfection? Sin? Nothing. Just I'm a perfect man. I have a perfect car. What do you mean? Well, the car has all of its parts. It has all the doors and has the engine. It has all its parts. So it is a perfect car that you got. So that's what perfect means. It means complete. So now you come to where you have this complete patience, where you are steadfast without any qualms whatsoever. In Hebrews 2:10, that's kind of interesting. Let's read that to kind of give you an idea of what perfect means right here. It said, "For it became him," that is, it was necessary for him, this is Christ, "for whom are all things," that is, everything is there for Christ, "and through whom are all things, in bringing many sons unto glory, to make the author of their salvation perfect through suffering." So here we have, I said Christ, that would be God. God makes the author of our salvation. That's Christ. When did Christ become perfect? It kind of sounds strange to this if I say it this way. Do you know Christ wasn't perfect when he was on earth? He wasn't. When did Christ become perfect? He became perfect when he died on the cross. And you say, well, wait just a minute. What do you mean he became perfect then? Oh no, when Christ was on this earth, he was perfect as far as sin is concerned. He had no sin. He was perfect as far as the Creator was concerned. He had created everything. He was perfect in 10,000, 100,000, million, jillion ways. But there's one thing that Christ was not perfect in. One thing he was not complete in. And here it is. It had to go through the suffering. Now let me ask you a question, then you'll be able to see it. You remember when John pulled out that sword and started to cut off those ears and so forth, and Jesus told him, he said, I could call for 12 legions of angels right now, okay? And I would be delivered. Well, let's suppose that he had it. Let's suppose that Jesus, as he's headed for the cross, he sees all that torture. He'd call for the angels. They would have come, and they'd have rescued him, and then he'd go back to heaven. Now, he'd back up to heaven. That's fine. He didn't sin. He would be up there. But there's one thing that he couldn't do. What would that one thing be? Save men. He couldn't be our Savior because he had to shed his blood to become our Savior. That's what perfect means. So perfect has nothing to do really with patience. It has to do with completeness that we'll get here. So let your patience then have its perfect work. Entire. Let it be entire. That means it has all its parts that belongs to it. Newborn baby, they would call it an entire baby. Was its birth okay? Yet has all of its parts. The lame man in Acts 3:16, you know that he was sitting there and Peter and John raised him up and then he started jumping and he said in all soundness, that's the word here, in entirety. His legs. He used to not have legs or not have one leg or his legs were not working. He wasn't, he didn't have all the parts there. But when they pulled him up, he had everything. Big. And the way he goes. So, it says lacking in nothing. That means not being left behind by another. Nobody's ahead. You're complete. You're not destitute or lacking in anything. It's those patience. Now let's read with this in mind, Romans 5. And look what Paul said elsewhere. But we also rejoice in our tribulations. So he said the same thing as James. Knowing that tribulation worketh steadfastness. This tribulation will work steadfastness. It'll keep us moving on. And steadfast approvedness. Approvedness. If you remain steadfast, immovable, not changing, that's patience. If you remain there, then that it will work this steadfastness, make this steadfastness even more. And if you're steadfastness, then approvedness. When can a person understand that they have faith that is approved by God? Is it 12 minutes after their baptism? No. Okay. No, it's not. How many times have you looked at somebody who was baptized? And you look and you say, I hope they remain. I hope they have the backbone. If you ask them, oh yeah, I do. But it's not until you see how they go through the problems of life, how they endure the suffering for Christ. And when you see that, They're steadfast. And when they're steadfast, that person's approved. That person has the kind of faith that God would have us to have. Now, if you have that, then you've got hope. You've got hope. What is that? It's a desire plus expectation. I have a great desire to be with God, and now I have an expectation to be with God. Why is my expectation? Because I have a faith that is immovable. I have a faith that is solid. And if I do that, I'll not be put to shame. I might lose everything I have. People might come by my house and kick me out of the house, and I may be living in a tent out there. That would be embarrassing, but I wouldn't be put to shame. Because I may have to live in a tent the rest of my life, but at the end of my life, I know where I'll be going. So that's the way Paul put it, and that's what James is saying is true with us. Now, after he tells us about that, it's true with that in verse 2 and 3 and 4. Now then, he's going to tell us how to gain wisdom so we can count it all joy. Now, this whole section is going to be on tribulations. Keep that in mind. How in the world can I have wisdom enough to understand that I should be joyful in my tribulations? That's the context. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about two people entering into marriage and we say, now go into this with wisdom. We're not talking about that relationship. We're talking about tribulations and suffering. He then says, but if any of you lacketh wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to all liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. So he points out, if you lack wisdom, by the way, let me see your hands on all of you who say that you have all the wisdom you need right now. So raise them real high. It's just humiliating to even ask that question, isn't it? See? And if I say, well, how much wisdom do you really need? How much do you think you have, and how much more do you think you need? How would it come out? See? Oh man, I need so much. Okay, he gives a promise here. He said, now if any of you lacketh wisdom, and then he tells how to do it, let him ask of God. Now this is kind of interesting. He didn't say, study philosophy. Go to some psychological school and study psychology. No, he said, ask of God. So you go and you ask God. Then the promise is there, and that is, and he will give it to you liberally. He'll give it to you liberally. So he said, I promise you, I will give you wisdom. Now, we come back to this. Let me warn you. Before you ask God for wisdom, I want you to think about it very seriously. I want you to think about it really seriously, because it may cause you more problems than you've ever had in your whole life. Think about it. It may turn your life upside down. It may just absolutely destroy you. So I want you to think about it. God said, I'll give it to you. But how did God say he'd give it to you? He didn't say, did he? What?
Tests and trials. He doesn't just give it to you.
He's talking to us about in trials. He's not talking about miraculous wisdom, is he? Now, when I ask God for wisdom, what I want him to do is, Lord, I'm going to sleep tonight. Please give me wisdom. When I wake up in the morning, I'll be the wisest man that ever lived. That's what I want. But how does God give me wisdom? Well, one way God gives you wisdom is by going to the books of wisdom that he has given, isn't it? Proverbs and Psalms. Can you glean wisdom from reading those books? Oh man, you bet you can glean wisdom from reading those books. Wow, you can sure a lot. Look at this. What is wisdom? Wisdom is not knowledge. Knowledge is the obtaining of facts. Wisdom is knowing how to use them in your life. Have you ever seen anybody that's just a walking encyclopedia? Ask them any question you want to ask, and they just seem to know everything there is to know in the world. But their life is all goofed up. They're nutty. They're flaky. They're like this. They don't have wisdom. But they have all of the facts that are out there. Now, wisdom is knowing how to use it. And I think a good definition of wisdom is where I put that in red. Wisdom is being able to see the end from the beginning. Think about that. If you were to come to me and say, Lowell, I have a problem, and I want to ask your wisdom on this problem. Here's the problem. Now I have two options. I can either go this option A, or I can go option B. Now, I want to ask your wisdom. Okay. What are you asking me for? Think about what are you asking me for? You're asking me how's it going to come out. You're wanting me to analyze this. See, you're wanting me to use wisdom. So that means you're wanting me to analyze it, and so I analyze A. Okay, if you do this, here's what's going to happen. And it's not going to be good. Now, you may think it's going to be good, but it's not going to be good. But if you'll go B, it's going to cost you a lot. It's really going to cost you a lot, and it's not going to be pleasant. But I'll tell you one thing. When you get through this, you're going to be so happy, and everything is just going to be great. What you're asking when you ask a person for wisdom, you're saying, will you take this problem, and as we start on this problem, will you look and see how the end result will come out? See, that really is what wisdom is, being able to do that. Thayer, or some of them say it's the ability to judge soundly. Well, that's right. But it's being able to see that end from the beginning is really what the whole thing is about. Now, he's going to give it to you liberally, generously, or that should be without bargaining, is what Thayer says. He's not going to bargain with you. He's not going to say, okay, I'll give you wisdom if you'll do this. I'll give you wisdom if you'll do this. See? He's not going to do that. He's going to give it to you liberally. Now, generously, you're going to get plenty of it. You can be great and you can be wise. And he upbraideth not. When you ask God for wisdom, that word upbraid means to cast into one's teeth or reproach. You ever had anybody that's asked you the same question 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times and maybe didn't take your advice, and they come back and ask you again, and you say, why ask me? You don't ever listen anymore. And you get out. You reproach him. You turn away. God won't do that. God is always there. He's always ready. He will give you wisdom without upbraiding you in any way here. Now, how will he do it? Okay, God can give you wisdom. One way we know for certain is he has his teaching in the Bible, and he says, here's what you do, and if you do this, then the outcome will be good. Now, can you get wisdom anywhere other than Psalms and Proverbs, the books that are called books of wisdom? Can you get it in the Sermon on the Mount? Can you get it? Yeah, every book of the Bible. You read it. It's that knowledge. You glean that knowledge. You're not going to have wisdom without knowledge. It can't be. You can have knowledge without wisdom, but you can't have wisdom without knowledge. You're going to have the knowledge to be able to see events and see how things go. Then you're going to have that mysterious thing we call wisdom, being able to look in and see the end result. See, before you can have that wisdom. That's what Solomon had. He had that wisdom. When the two women came to him, and each one of them wanted a baby, and he proposed that ridiculous idea. You remember? go get a sword and cut that baby in two. Was Solomon able to look at the end result and see what would happen? He knew the real mother of that baby would expose herself. See, he knew that. He was able to see the end from the beginning. Now, you can get it from reading the Bible. Could you get it from people who have been through it? Would it be a wise thing if I am having some plumbing problems that maybe I could call Steve over and say, Steve, what do you think about this? I've got this and this and this. What do you think about it? Well, I know as much about it as Steve does. I mean, I know it's with my hot water system. And I know the hot water system starts with a hot water tank, and there's a pipe goes here and a pipe goes there and goes up to the faucet. I know all those facts. I know the pipes are screwed together. I know everything about it. Steve knows. But what is it he has that I don't have? See? He's going to be able to look at it and say, well, I've seen this 100 times. It could be this, it could be that. I saw him here the other day over at Dan's house. Dan's having a plumbing problem and a drainage problem, and he didn't know, and here's got a great big patio, and somewhere it appears that out there in the middle of that patio or somewhere else, don't know where, there's a plug, and what does he do? Does he go dig up his backyard, or does he tear down his house, or does he tear up the patio, or what does he do? And so Steve looks around. I know as much about that as Steve does. See, I can tell you about drainage systems. See, I know that. But Steve would, well, no, here. I said, Dan said, what you do is, if you do this, and so go get some water and do this. And no, it's not that. Okay, now then, so if you go out here, I'd go here. No, think here. Well, I'll tell you what. And so he chews on this, and finally he comes up and said, here's what I'd do, Dan. Here's what I'd do. See? Bing, try this first, try that second. Well, Dan's problem is fixed, you see. It's fixed. Now, I know as much about it as Steve does. But who's the best guy to call over and say, how do you do this thing? You see? So it's that way in every realm. See, in every realm. So do you ask people with more experience, people who's been through it? Yeah. Now there's another way to get wisdom, and you don't want this one. You just don't want it. So think about it before you ask God to give you wisdom. You do not want it. What is it? Your own experience. Your own experience. It may be that Denise is having trouble with Rod. What do I do with the guy? What am I going to do? Stubborn, mean, inconsiderate? What am I going to do? Lord, give me wisdom. Well, it just may be that the Lord opens up the door, and when he opens up the door, she's going to look and see, and they're both going to see a total, absolute mess. A total destruction of their family. And all Denise can see is that I'm left alone. I'll never be happy again. Everything is going, wow, it's all. Now guess what Denise is going to pray for then? Lord, I didn't mean this. See? Lord, I wanted it in another way. See? But that's the way that you learn the real wisdom. You see, the real wisdom. I've seen this happen over and over and over and over again, not only in my own life, but in other people's life that is in this way. There's an old saying, take it to heart. Be careful what you pray for. You might get it. And when you get it, it may be a way that you don't want to get it. See, is what it is. Now this is a real serious thing because it happens every day of our life in somebody's life in this way. That's here. But now, we come back to this. God said, if you lack wisdom, ask me. I'll give it to you. And I'll not do like dads do their sons or friends do friends. I'll not upbraid you. I'll give it to you. and I'll give it to you in abundance. And you'll be able to see it. See? And you'll be able to do this. Let's suppose, just for instance, Denise prays this. So God opens it up, and it all comes out that Rod has been on heavy drugs for the last 20 years. His mind is just totally saturated with drugs. That's the reason he's doing all those stupid things. And he's just totally saturated with drugs, and she finds out he spent all of his money in 401ks. He's totally broke. He's borrowed money up at the bank. He owes $200,000, totally broke, and getting ready to lose his job. What would Denise say? Oh, I didn't want this. I didn't want this. But now she can begin to work it out. See? Now she can begin to work it out. So now we can send Rod off to rehab. We can do this, we can do that, and start out. And in 20 years, why, Rod's back up on going again, you see. This just happens all the time that we see it. So what I'm trying to emphasize is this is not a Bible class that you come to have fun. This is the book of James. This is real life. This is telling it like it is, see? And it's telling it in a situation that all of us are involved in. We all know what troubles are. All of us, see, know this. So what do, you see, about this situation? Now, he says, then ask in faith. Now, when you ask him, ask in faith, and that is, you believe he'll do what he says. You trust God. God said he'd give me wisdom. I believe with all of my heart God will give me wisdom. Now, I hope he'll give it to me in a real, easy, nice way. But I really believe God will give me this wisdom. See? So you ask that. Doubting nothing. So as you're praying to God, don't doubt. Lord, give me wisdom. You believe he will, doubting nothing. That means be at variance with oneself. Inward debating. The word is this. The word comes from two words that means judging through. It means that if I'm trying to buy a new car, and I think this is the best car, I'm going to buy this car. But no, I think this would be the best car. But I'm not, and I'm judging. I'm making judgment. I don't know. I'm trying to make up my mind. I haven't firmly made up my mind. That's what that word is. Now that's good to do if you're buying a car, right? But if you're asking God, don't ask God for this and then have any doubt and think, but maybe he probably won't do it. Well, yeah, God will, because God said he would, but I don't know whether God would answer my prayer or not, but I believe he will. Hope so. And so you go back and forth, see, in this. See the real practical thing here. So doubting nothing, because he that doubteth has a double mind. He's double-minded. That word in the Greek is two-souled. We would never say that way in English. He's a two-souled person. You're sold. It's you got. Here it is inside here. I'm living in here. What would you think if all of a sudden there's two of me in here and they're opposite one the other? See? Two guys in here. And you ever heard anybody say, well, you know, this guy's this way this day and that way tomorrow? He just, you know, that's it. He's a double-lifed man. He's a double-minded. He can't make up his mind. He doesn't have conviction. And he's unstable in all of his ways. Unstable means unsettled. It's a word that they used to describe a drunk man that couldn't walk a line, that he's weaving and walking along there, and that's the word that they would use. So God says this, if you want wisdom, you ask me. And you believe it beyond any shadow of a doubt that I'll give it to you. And I will. And don't you doubt at all. And if you do doubt, don't let that man think he'll receive anything. I'm not going to answer your prayer if you doubt. See, it's what he says. God gives us two promises. I'll answer your prayers if you ask in faith. I'll not answer your prayers if you doubt. And the way I'll look at you is, I'll look at you like a drunk Christian. You weaving around and stumbling around all the way through life, unless you have that absolute faith, you see, in God. Okay, now we're not through with trials yet, but we're through with this class. And so now then, next time, we'll start out in verse 9, and he's going to tell us something that, see whether this fits you or not. He's going to talk about a rich man and a poor man, whether you fall into that category. Anybody in here fall into either rich or poor, high or low? And he said, now here's how you have to look at life. There's a way that you have to look at that life then. Okay, Dave?
Quick question, Lowell. On training for wisdom, I mean, he says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask. If I go back to verse 2, it says, my brethren, count it all joy, which if you fall into various trials. Is he speaking of wisdom in a general sense, or is he saying if you come across something that's bothering you and you can't deal with it, you don't have the wisdom to pray for that, or in general?
I think he's talking about the thing that you can't handle. Yeah, that you come across something that you can't handle, you pray to God for. It's what I would understand. This is this temptation that you fall into. And yeah. Okay, class dismissed.